Greetings, everybody, beautiful people all around the earth. We have an amazing guest today. We have Dr. Courtney Brown, who is the owner and the founder of the Farsight Institute and also Farsight Prime, which is absolutely dedicated to the exploration of remote viewing and remote viewing not only current times and current projects, but historical ones, past and future. Dr. Courtney Brown is a tenured professor at a major university, mathematics and statistics. Is that correct?
Yes, that's right. I that's the courses I teach in the social science department.
Fantastic. And so he has dedicated a lot of his time and life to this work. This is your life's work. Would you say that?
Yeah, absolutely.
So welcome, and it's a great honor to have you here today. I personally have been aware of Courtney's work all the way back 2008, 2009. So it's fantastic to see how this has kind of come full circle, and a lot of the work that you are putting out now is really, I mean, it's always been pertinent and it's always been very important. However, it could not come at a better time on our planet now, when there is so much chaos, when there's so much, well, it's a dichotomy. There's a full spectrum of dark and light, good and bad, if you want to call it that. But I mean, Earth is where it's at. It's a real melting pot for all sorts of experiences where we have come to sort out things and to pretty much, bottom line, progress with our own evolving as a species, because we are at a tipping point now where we're either going to go on one timeline or another, or actually there's an infinite number that we could take, but we're hoping we take the good one and really become, instead of being human of Earth, becoming man, becoming a part of our galactic family that have forever been hoping for this moment that we can cross the threshold and work out all of our issues, our suppression, and move forward and join our galactic family. Courtney, welcome.
Thank you so much for having me on your show. Yeah, so it was a real rude awakening for me to discover what's really going on. Again, at Farsight, we use our mental procedures to perceive that came out of the United States military and used for, and are still used to this day, for espionage, but we use them for civilian purposes, for exploration and for scientific experiments. Let me give you a little bit of the history of me personally. And that is when I started this work with remote viewing in the 1990s. I was very innocent, and so fascinating to me to be able to understand that I could use structured programs to control mental perceptions such that you could see things, including things related to aliens, life, UFOs, and extraterrestrials. And for me, it was really sort of an exploration into who I was to be able to do this. But after doing that, I ended up creating the Farsight Institute, and a lot has happened since then. A lot went under the bridge, a lot went over the bridge. And the investigations continued and continued. It took a long time for us to train a lot of people, and then a few people stuck with us. And for those people to finally get to the point where they could do these procedures, which originated with the US military, but we advanced procedures a lot. So our procedures are not the ones that the US military use. We consider those starting points. And then ours are so complicated that we have these pre-printed templates to do it, because there's so many things the viewers have to do. And then it takes a year for them to train full-time to do this. And so our viewers are really good. They've been at it for many years. But what we discovered in the process was that initial view of just thinking about how great it is to see into the using mental perceptions into the past, present, and future. What we discovered was that the world out there was just like Earth. Yeah. They have sides, They have battles. They've essentially had a galaxy. We discovered that the entire galaxy was essentially a scene of a Holocaust for like that. So like, that lasted for like 1 million years. It was way worse than anything we've experienced on Earth. And what we've experienced on Earth is bad. But just look at human behavior. Human behavior, we have size, we have different types of governments. We have more restrictive governments like China and Russia, and then we have more liberal governments like the United States and Europeans, Western Europeans, Australians. But with that in mind, as above, so below, that's a reflection of what you see out there. Yeah. And so what we found is that there's two essential types of ways of dealing with things, if you want to break things down into the most basic terms, in the galaxy. And that is, there are some severely repressive authoritarian types, and they have a block. They govern a huge swath of territory. And then there is more liberal, free will type of people. And what we found is that the free will and the authoritarian types are essentially at a stalemate. And then we found out that Earth is occupied and controlled within the territory of the repressive authoritarian types, which was all big. That's not what I was thinking when we started this thing. And that in the solar system, to make a long story short, the solar system, we had a heavyweight dominance of the free will type. But on planet Earth, we have a lopsided dominance, to put it mildly, yeah, of the authoritarian types. So there's a standoff in the solar system. And the authoritarian types know that they can't get away with a lot, yeah, because the free will types are in the solar system. But they know that if they can get the humans on Earth to side with them, the free will types will respect that and simply leave. And then the authoritarian types have free reign to do anything they want. The last time they had that was back in the ancient Egyptian pyramid days, when everyone was a slave, literally working with rock and the dirt. And then the authoritarian types, and that the Earth and our system, our civilization, is within a territory that's occupied by the authoritarian bad guys. So the free will guys would like this planet to be released, but getting that to happen is a very tricky problem. It's a little bit like, let us say, the best way to look at our Earth is to say we're a reflection of everything else in the galaxy. So we have countries that are more authoritarian and countries that are more free will. US, European, Western European, Australia, more free will. Russia, China, Myanmar, Iraq. That's Iran, for example. Not Iraq now, but especially, well, to some extent, yes, but especially Iraq during the Saddam Hussein days, Afghanistan, more oppressive, more controlled, top down. And that type of thinking is what we see in the galaxy. There's two ways of doing things. So if you look at Russia and China, especially, they like to develop spheres of influence. And then if you look at the United States, Europe, Australia, and so on, they like to develop spheres of influence as well. Well, the Earth is within the sphere of influence of the authoritarian repressive ones. And the last time the authoritarians had full reign was back in the Egyptian days, building the pyramids. So what we are finding ourselves in now is a very delicate situation where we want to have disclosure of the ET presence, but the authoritarian types are doing absolutely everything to control the Earth population. Interestingly, they control the population fundamentally through psychological means. They do not control it by putting a gun to everybody's head and then beating people up. To some extent, that happened back in the ancient Egyptian days. That's how slavery occurred in the old building of the pyramid days. But now it's really almost 100% psychological, because the free will ETs have some limits that they place on what the authoritarian ETs can get to. But the free will ETs can't just invade, just like the free will, the more free will oriented governments like the United States, Europe, Western Europeans, Australian, they can't invade China or invade Russia in order to say you're controlling your populations. They want to be free. We can't invade them. In fact, those populations, if we did try to invade them, those populations would fight back. So the free will ETs are really dependent upon humans on Earth rising up.
Yeah.
And
revolt come, I guess you could say. But going back to this authority, I really became aware of this authoritarian dictatorship, or at least this organization that was very apparent when Tony Rodriguez was coming out with his information, how when you leave the Earth, don't think you're free to do what you want, because there is an organizational structure in place with authoritarian leadership, I should say, that is present throughout not only our solar system. I guess it would go from being on Earth, and then let's just say you want to go and travel out. Well, you first have to go and see if it's okay, perhaps at the moon. Maybe the moon is, when I look at the moon, I clairvoyantly feel industry. That's what first comes to mind. It's an absolute hive of activity. And then from there, he was speaking about how there were like these, not time lords, but these beings that were in control of the time, and how they would go out and do these jobs. Perhaps they had to go through this, in one case, they had to go through like a wormhole near Jupiter, but they needed to have authority of when exactly they could go to slip in to be, I guess, congruent with the time structure. So there's some real authoritarian structure within, everything's organized within our galactic system, from a local solar system, and it just compounds and expands out. There would be overlords, lords of each planet, lords of, our solar system. Then on a galactic level, it just keeps going up and up within the rank system. Would you agree with this?
Yeah, up until recently, we have been focusing totally on remote viewing, that mental perception for perceiving things and writing things down, and then and then describing what we found out. But that was the beginning plan to develop the perceptual methods so that we could rewrite the history of the history of the, well, not of the United Planets, but the history of the planet Earth. But the final stage to make this relevant to people is to prove that the extraterrestrials exist. Because part of the psychological warfare to keep the planet repressed is to dismiss and ridicule and to say there's no discovery of aliens or extraterrestrial life. So to prove that this is a prison planet, that this is a situation where the governments are highly involved with the authoritarian entities in order to control what people know, to prove that, we have to demonstrate that the extraterrestrials actually exist. So that started in January of this year. Now, we had to wait till now to do this. We have the largest public venue of remote viewing projects done by extremely well-trained people anywhere. There are no major public projects in remote viewing anywhere else. So we have, over the last couple of decades, we developed a library of public projects done under very defendable scientific conditions, meaning totally blind. The viewers do their work totally blind. They were not told anything when they do their work. That all they knew is there was a target, period, and they describe it. And using these mental procedures, we have developed a library of over 50 projects. Those projects essentially rewrite the history of the world. And we have found that there are, of course, huge numbers of extraterrestrials, and that there are basically two sides: an oppressive authoritarian side and a free will side. So we spent our time developing our library of projects with remote viewing so we could tell people what's been going on over the last few thousand years. But now to prove it, we had to wait until certain cameras became available to show what the ETs are actually doing. So these cameras became available to people to buy in 2022. So some So starting in January of 2023, this year, we finally got our act together enough with those exact cameras. We had to also raise some money in order to buy the cameras and so on, to be able to demonstrate how to take reliably videos of extraterrestrial spacecraft. So what we have done now, and that's a big project that we're doing now at Farsight, is telling people how to do it. Now, it is impossible for me to say, we took a picture of a UFO, see it's an extraterrestrial spacecraft, and then show it to you and convince you. Because the psychological warfare is so deeply embedded. There'll always debunkers and what we might call prison authorities and human collaborators, they will dismiss it. They will say, it was a smudge. Oh, it was swamp gas. It was this. It was that. It was lightning. It was a mistake, a digital error in this, and it's too fuzzy, it's too foggy. So it's impossible to prove that the extraterrestrials exist by showing you a video of a real UFO, because the debunkers will dismiss it. So what we are doing now is teaching people how to take the photos and videos themselves so that they can do it, and they can say, so you can dismiss what other people do, but you can't dismiss what you did. And so what we're doing now is showing people how to take it. And what we have discovered in our own use of these is that the extraterrestrial presence in Earth's atmosphere is absolutely huge. It's huge. It's not like, oh, there was a craft. There might have been a crash in 1947 in Roswell. Oh, there was one picture that was a little unusual. I think we'll have to have a congressional hearing on that, or perhaps an investigation. The military will investigate this picture a little bit longer. That's bogus. That's totally corrupt, because the extraterrestrials and their crafts are above you at any particular moment in time. There's probably 10 or 20 ships right above your head. They're all using cloaking technology. They're all using stealth technology. They're all trying to hide themselves. So what we have done with our cameras, we use Panasonic Lumix GH6. Now, I have no association with Panasonic, so I'm not like working to sell their cameras, but we use Panasonic Lumix GH6 cameras, and those cameras are now capable of taking 4K video, and that's important. 4K is really high resolution video at 120 frames a second, and we can get those cameras modified to be full spectrum cameras, so we can take pictures in the infrared band. You can only 98% of the time you can only see the UFOs in infrared. You can't see them with visible light. They're totally invisible. They're using stealth tech. But in infrared, they are clear as day. And you can't shoot them at 30 frames a second or 24, 25 frames a second, because they move too fast. If you do a video and you have 24, 25, or 30 frames a second, which is normal video, all you see is a dot on the picture. You have no idea what that is. It must be a bright star. Maybe it was Venus or something. But if you take them at 120 frames a second, you see them clearly with their shapes and everything move across the screen.
So what's your take then on, obviously with your research that you are involved with now, there is a lot of interest and there seems to be some breadcrumbs thrown out from the government regarding UFO sightings. Obviously, we've got the whole
It's increasing.
It's increasing. A kind of like subtle disclosure. I wouldn't call it that though, because I have suspicions about that, and I seem to think that this is gearing up clairvoyantly to a false flag operation of a fake alien invasion. I have felt this for a couple of years before everything that happened in 2020. I don't want to get into that because I've got flagged on my channel for already expressing my views about that. But I seem to think that this is gearing up towards something, and something major, where there is going to be some kind of false flag operation that the government is going to be doing, and people are, they're going to be under this influence that they are seeing something from outer space, and it is actually the government that is going to try and shift our humanity in a fearful state of mind, and once again, moving into a direction where it's going to be catastrophe. And something to mention, another remote viewer, obviously you would know of him, Lynn Buchanan, had mentioned that potentially, and actually quite imminent, I'm pretty sure that was the word he used, that there could be in our future, near future, an electromagnetic blackout, meaning that everything that we are accustomed to now and used to now in terms of using the internet, we have access to technology. You and I, like we're communicating right now, that's all going to be gone. And we're going to be depending on communication purely by telepathic means and telepathic resources. Do you have any insight into this? And do you believe that this is something that could happen?
Well, that's certainly going to be one of the strategies to try to maintain control when disclosure actually looks like it's imminent. When the authorities find out, discover, decide that there's no way they can stop it, that it's going to happen, then it's going to become a desperate effort on the side of the oppressive side to keep control of everything. And then anything can happen. A false flag type of an operation is one option that they can go to. Understand that everything is not similar. Everything is not sort of the same within the authorities within the government. Within the United States government, for example, everything is split. The military is in standoff. They're split right down the center. Half of the military wants to keep the arrangements that they have with the oppressive extraterrestrials who, work with them a bit on weapons technology. Nothing that could seriously challenge the authoritarians themselves, but nonetheless, there's arrangements that have been made and documents have been signed. On the other hand, there are free will ETs that would like to have this disclosure fully happen. So there's a tension. Now, the free will ETs basically have won the hearts and minds of the population by working with Hollywood and filmmaking and book writers and people like that. And so a lot of the science fiction shows that you see coming out have been influenced through the screenwriters by ideas that have been seeded by the free will ET. So we get the Star Wars sagas, we get the Matrix, where a whole population is controlled mentally. You get a lot of stuff coming out in science fiction that it gives you a window into how this is stuff that's really going on. So people in a psychological way are sort of ready for this. The authoritarian ETs, they don't want that. But nonetheless, there's nothing they could do to stop that. However, at some point in time, it's going to become inevitable. And when that becomes inevitable, then one of the things they're going to have to do is shut down, control the population in some way. And controlling the population by shutting down internet and stuff like that may be one thing that's happened. One thing that we have discovered is back in the old days, there were other attempts by the free will ETs to free the planet by inserting certain ideas. All of the major religions started out by groups of extraterrestrials who wanted to insert ideas into the population and then let those ideas percolate for a few centuries until the population sort of wakes up and becomes in a better state. All of those ideas were taken over time by the authoritarian side to manipulate further control. So you had the ancient Greek and Roman gods that were thoroughly a construction of the authoritarian regimes being challenged by the idea of more liberal thinking. And then you had the development of, say, Christianity. But when that became inevitable that those ideas are going to take over, you had the corruption of those ideas so that you have a parallel construction with the Holy Roman Church, for example, the Catholic Church, for example, where you have saints replacing all the ancient gods. So you have a one-to-one correspondence with these various saints, and then you have this rigid control of thinking. If you make a mistake, you will burn in hell forever. That type of a thinking, so that you're in a fear-laden society. So the slow method didn't work. So what's being done now with the free will ETs is a fast method. They're trying to do something different, where instead of having free will thinking sort of slowly grow like the grass growing into the society, they're trying to have a rapid disclosure that cannot be so easily controlled by the authoritarian regime. authoritarian ETs. And so that's what's going on right now. And that's what I'm involved in, to help that disclosure process happen. When it gets to a sufficient point, which we're very close to now, where there's a kickover and it starts happening rapidly, then you have to think of what strategies the authoritarian types will do to try to keep control of things. And a false flag type of thing that you just described, an alien invasion, forcing the authorities to respond, that's one possibility that could happen.
Well, I hope it doesn't happen, and I hope it's a more harmonious transition into first contact. I just want to follow on with that. You actually did a fantastic project with Dick Olgeier and Daz Smith about the Phoenix Lights, which was fantastic, by the way. This was extraordinary, and if anybody would like to see more insight to the Phoenix Lights, go to Farsight Prime, because you will find it there. And what I actually found fascinating with that, particularly, was when Dick Olgeier was describing what was inside this incredibly beautiful big ship, which in his words was a being. And he would typically say this being had more than 10 PhDs and someone of great altruism and just peace and love. And then obviously Daz also had a similar experience when he did his work with that as well. But I was quite taken by that. And then I have heard the channel Bashar talking about this group of entities called the Shalaniah, meaning first contact, whereas the government tried to absolutely debunk it, saying it was flares. I mean, I guess in many respects, this was a huge, well, I mean, it was in many ways a huge kind of just localized disclosure of, them coming here saying, look, we are here, we come in peace, we love you, we want you to rise up and join us. Do you have any insights to share on that type of disclosure with the Phoenix Lights?
That was an excellent example of the free will ETs doing the best they can to try to wake up humanity. They can't do this a lot because this is essentially an authoritarian controlled government, an authoritarian controlled planet, which is being run simply as a prison, to be quite honest. And the free will ETs can't do that type of thing all the time. They can't amass zillions of ships and put them over the White House and hold them there until disclosure triggers. That's the same thing as the United States can't put zillions of aircraft over the Kremlin or over Beijing and force everybody to say, see, we're good guys, we think you should. It would start a shooting war. So the free will ETs are limited in what they can do because this is not their territory. But in the context of disclosure, in the context of people acknowledging in a widespread way that the extraterrestrials exist, then you could have basically a revolution from below. And as soon as you have disclosure and the whole population of the planet saying, say what? What's been going on? What? And then they can openly side with the free will ETs and say, this is crazy. We don't want this type of control. And then it's a free will decision. And then the free will ETs can intervene, and they have the military power to intervene and confront the authoritarian types. And the authoritarian types would have to leave. However, it cannot happen without disclosure because this is somebody else's planet. And the psychological oppression is huge. So that's a really big issue. So the Phoenix Lights was one example, but it's not something that can be repeated every day. It's very challenging for that to happen.
Yes, and I agree. And a lot of what I describe and discuss on my channel is on an individual basis, how people can begin to think a different way, to think more galactically, to clean up any internal issues and anguish and their own inner oppression that they have to overcome. Because like I say to people on my channel, this golden age and this new age of our expansion within this galactic community, it's not going to be like one day we suddenly wake up and there's going to be a shower of gold glitter coming across the sky and we're all going to be peaceful and loving each other. However, we need to meet them with our frequency. We need to refine our frequency on an individual basis, tolerate our weaknesses with each other, and learn to be more loving and to be of more service to each other. This is how we are going to raise the frequency. And it's tough for people because, like,
Tough.
it's tough because they're stuck in this psychological conditioning that's been in play for such a long time, thousands and thousands of years since, we were basically first put here. And, the Earth is just such an incredible planet. And in many ways, we're so blessed to be here. But in saying that, it's also it's a very hard planet. But people have to realize that the things that are happening are not happening to them, but they are happening for them and for their own evolution.
Yeah, absolutely.
So actually, there was some other interesting information for what was going to be coming in our future. And of course, when we delve into the world of metaphysics and quantum physics and infinite amount of timelines, because essentially that's what it is. We're in this matrix of an infinite amount of timelines of where we could possibly go as a humanity. However, I found something interesting to note that when Andrew Basiago, obviously the lawyer who was quite famous for his time in the Project Pegasus, time back in the 70s, he had mentioned that by 2045, we would, as a humanity, we would have access to teleport technology. Do you have any information, or can you perhaps support that statement by him as to what you see or what you have found within your research with remote viewing to come of our future? Do you see?
Yeah, actually, we haven't seen anything like that type of teleport technology across planets. What we have seen that might be considered sort of similar is movement across short spaces where bodies get looks like it's levitated up from a house into a ship, that type of a short space. Also, the death experience used to be a means of transportation. So this idea of people dying and hoping that if they pray hard enough, they could have eternal life. That's crazy. That's a authoritarian ET contrived set of ideas that's been put on the planet. It's impossible to kill a person. You can kill the body, but the person continues to exist. So it is possible to get that body, that person out of the body and put into a ship or put into you can capture a person that way. You can't destroy a person, but you can capture them. We call those ISBs, someone who is simply for the person of being, simply for the purpose of being. We don't use the word soul or spirit because all of the religious baggage that comes along with it. So we are all ISBs. So, in this planet, what we have found is that short way type of movements like that are very possible. In the death experience where people die and the ISB is no longer connected to the body, that used to be a means of transportation, and then you could get out and go someplace else. But this place is controlled, so the ISBs can't get out. Even so, death is not a means of transportation. But in the old days, that type of transportation, you might have considered it sort of teleportation-ish, in the sense that they could travel galactic distances and be born again someplace else. But what we do find, however, is that there are portals of what you might call them portals, where you can get rapid transportation between one part of the galaxy and another part of the galaxy. So we do have ships that go in and then they come out. Many ships don't do that to travel interstellar distances. They just go because they have technology that can simply take a ship from one place to another really fast. But for very large distances, we have seen these portals where the ships go in and then they come out someplace else. So it's sort of a rapid type of thing. However, it's really important to say all of this can be dismissed by mainstream as just sort of crazy thinking until you prove that the extraterrestrials are there in huge numbers. And that can now be done. That's what we're doing at Farsight. You can see all of our projects, by the way, at farsightprime.com, FARSIGHT, prime.com. Yep. And the instructions, we even have it on our nonprofit's website, farsight.org, for how to take videos of these extraterrestrial spaceships. What we are finding in any 10-minute clip using the appropriately converted cameras and edited process, and any 10-minute clip, you get like 20 instances of real UFOs, all using stealth technology. We can crack it only because we use infrared cameras shooting at 120 frames a second. But there's like, in any 10-minute clip, you can come up with at least 20 instances of alien spacecraft right over your head. And that's not in any one spot. Also, if people want to, we found that people need to see this stuff in the modern technology, which is on their phone. So on my Instagram page, which is Courtney Brown Farsight, all one word, Courtney Brown, COURTNEY, Brown, BROWN, FARSIGHT, we're posting some of these clips that we get of these UFOs.
I'll
now,
put
these is
for that in the description as well. Then people have a look at them.
Now, those are just a few clips. We have hundreds of these things, and we only started in January taking pictures of the videos of these things. And these videos are only 10 minutes long. And out of those 10-minute long clips, we get hundreds of these examples. Now, the question is, if the extraterrestrial ships are so dominantly present, then why are they trying so hard to hide themselves? Because it's not like there's one ship that was seen in 1976 and there's a fuzzy picture, and you have to sort of, it's any time of the day, full daylight, with the appropriate cameras, they are there. And I'm talking everything from huge motherships down to small ships that you can see totally clear. Yeah. And once you realize they're everywhere, so many, you have to say, what have they been doing here then? It's not an issue of one ship discovered 20 years ago. It's like they're constantly there in huge numbers, and you don't have to take my word for it. All we're doing is showing people how to set up the cameras and how to take it so they can see it for themselves. Then you have to say, well, then they've got to be up to no good if they're trying so hard to hide themselves. Why are they using stealth technology so that people can't see? Why are they traveling at well over 20,000 miles an hour, which is over 32,000 kilometers an hour? That's crazy fast. Why are they doing that so people just can't see up there? As soon as you can see them with the appropriate cameras, it's a game changer. So that's what we're doing now at Farsight. Many of our projects now have video recordings that we took with our own cameras, and then we use our remote viewers under very defendable blind conditions to go in and describe who they are, where they came from, and so on like that. So the stuff that you have seen with some people like Tony Rodriguez and others that came through and investigating, it becomes very credible once you realize it's no longer a hidden topic, because you can take the videos yourself. We give the very clear explanations of how to do that. So we started doing that just this year. At Farsight, we spent since the 1990s, the last few decades, developing libraries of projects using remote viewing to basically rewrite the entire history of humanity, so that you can see how very badly distorted everything has been in terms of what you learn in schools, what the mainstream media says, what the government says. And now we're at the final stage of proving to everyone that the extraterrestrials are real and that they're right above your head. And you don't have to trust me. You don't have to trust you. You don't have to trust anybody. You can get the camera, set it up, hit the record button, analyze the footage, and see the ships for yourself.
But I genuinely believe that many people on this planet already believe they are there. I think many people do. It's the government that will continually downplay things or say it's, swamp gas or whatever. I think people are waiting for the government. I think it's almost an anticlimax for people that, come on, government, why can't you be honest about this with us? We have put you in power to govern our planet. Be honest with us with what you are, what you know about this. So I think most people, at least people that I speak to, although, you know, it may seem a little far out there for them to believe initially, once you do your own research, you realize that most people are believing that there is life. Probably they don't know how prolific it is around our planet, but there is so much life around us. And I think most people are already accepting of that. But it's our government that needs to catch up and start being straight and honest with us, being more transparent. But again, you know, I think there's a tug of war even within the government and certain factions within the government, you know, call them black operations, you know, gray groups, whatever, all these private corporations that work under the auspices of being government. However, I think at some point either the government's hand is going to be forced because the disclosure or the presence is just too great, or something happens where it is perhaps typically something like a calamity or a catastrophe, wherein the ETs come in to either help or salvage. I don't know, but I think most people are believing there is life out there. And according to some channeled information back in the 50s, this is how old it is, which I believe is very timeless information and just absolutely checks out to what's happening now. They say that, you know, there are thousands and thousands of ships around the outer orbits of our planet, and not just our planet, but, you know, everywhere. And they are consistently and always watching. Something I also wanted to point out to you was, even though there's been this galactic war, like you've shared, happening and being going on throughout for millions of years, basically, Lacerta, who was a female reptilian being, I believe you've probably heard about her. She states that her kind are native to planet Earth, and there has been this skirmish, this massive galactic skirmish that's been going on for thousands of years. But she's pretty adamant that her kind are native to this planet, and that we're not. Obviously, I believe we're all not at some extent, but do you have any thoughts about the reptilian agenda and their presence perhaps down at Antarctica? And have you done any
Yeah,
on that?
we have done a lot on that. It's true and not true. What was just what you just said. The the reptilians were dominant on the planet first, in the sense that when their ancient dinosaurs were going on, we have a full project on the death of the dinosaurs, and at Farsight, and you can at farsightprime.com you can see that project that describes everything under with perfect controls in terms of the remote viewing. You actually watch original videos recorded blind of the remote viewers describing exactly what happened. What happened was that the solar system didn't have just reptilians in it, but planet Earth was dominated by the reptilians. And there was an intelligent group of reptilians that lived here on this planet together with the dinosaurs. They didn't start here. They came here from somewhere else. But nonetheless, in terms of intelligent beings running around, they were here before the large mass of humanity came here. And what happened was there was an attack. So the death of the dinosaurs wasn't some random asteroid that came by and smashed them. There was an attack of non-reptilian humanoid types that were trying to get the reptilians out of the system. And because of this galactic war that had been going on for like a million years. And what they did was they actually, for a long time, the struggle between the reptilians and non-reptilians has been going on like for a very, very, very long time. You're talking hundreds of millions, perhaps billions of years. It's been a struggle. But those reptilians are not the ones that are here now. And what happened in the attack, a very common method in interstellar conflicts, is to throw asteroids onto a planet. And it looks like a natural thing. It looks like, and asteroids are like nuclear bombs. They destroy everything, but they have no radiation. So it's sort of an interesting way to do it. And what they did is these humanoid humanoid type beings with their ships brought a whole bunch of asteroids. They corralled a whole bunch of asteroids, not just one, and threw them at the planet at a certain time. That basically just caused a huge thing. The reptilians that were here that came from somewhere else tried to escape, and then the humanoids in their ships shot them down out of the sky as they were trying to get out. So it was a complete extermination. And you might have even considered it genocide. I'm not saying the reptilians were good or bad. I'm just saying it was a complete wipeout of the dominance of the reptilian side. And then the humanoid types, the mammalian types started to grow. And over the millions of years, you had the development of a humanoid type of civilization. We've actually had human type civilizations a few times on this planet. But the development of mammalian life began after the dinosaurs were finally sort of knocked way down. And then you have us eventually coming out. And so when the reptilians that you see now on the planet, and we actually have a project, for example, our Area 51 project, we actually went down into Area 51, deep, 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 deep underneath. At the very lower levels, there's zillions of them. That's where the reptilians actually like being underground, and they have large underground facilities. And that's where there's interaction between the American government and the extraterrestrials, especially the reptilians, in those underground areas, especially all over the planet, because the underground areas extend, far and wide. However, the reptilians that are there now came more recently. They're still reptilians, and yes, there were reptilians back in the old ancient dinosaur days, and the dinosaurs were largely killed off by the asteroid rocks that didn't randomly hit, but they were thrown at the planet in a war type situation. But the intelligent reptilians were totally wiped out by the attack. And the new reptilians that came from elsewhere. They're similar, they're reptilians, so on, but they're not the same reptilians as before. But so the story is actually correct. The reptilians were here first.
Yeah.
But there was a conflict. Then they were gone. Right. And now they're back.
Right. And the conflict is continuing. But so in terms of what is happening down in Antarctica, though, it seems to be there is just so much going on. There's so much activity that is kept under wraps by the government, because for, I guess the conventional person, they would think that Antarctica, there's no life. There's a couple of scientists on a couple of, bases down there just doing, perhaps historical or geological engineering work or something like that. But that couldn't be more further from the truth. When Linda Moulton Howe brought out her documentary about Antarctica and interviewing her guests, Spartan 1 and 2, they went on to say, who were at the time serving, I believe, in the American military, they went on to say how they found this extraordinary base that was, if Spartan 1 could speculate, 60 acres in size, a perfectly aligned hexagonal, like an underground base that was made out of like a basalt. He says he's not sure what it was. But when he went inside, that the entire area was full of glyphs that were of an unknown origin. He did not know what these glyphs were. He said it was a cross between Egyptian and perhaps something else. And he was, he said it was absolutely fascinating to know that this was down, I think it was McMurdo base, the McMurdo base, if I can remember correctly. Do you have any information into this, or have you seen these incredibly big bases that potentially could be, of a reptilian nature? It's hard to say, but I feel there's many different kinds of ETs that perhaps are there temporary, visiting, doing work, exchanging. I'm not sure, but it's obviously a lot more going on than what we're being told.
We've done two major projects that have involved the Antarctica region. More recently, we did something called Project High Jump, where that was a project that we investigated a base that was in Antarctica. I can mention that as in just a bit. But we've also done the Atlantis project. This is not in dispute in the major mainstream science. Antarctica used to be warm. And that's not like millions of years ago. That's like 50, 70,000 years ago. It used to be warm. And what happened was that there are other human us type civilizations that were technologically advanced. And when Antarctica was warm, before the sort of a major global change happened and became cold, there was a lot of tech down there. So the reason, and that's human tech, very advanced human tech that you would consider advanced enough to be like ET tech. So the reason that the governments are so deeply involved and interested in Antarctica is not because they're looking for ice cores. Okay, there are some scientists out there that are looking at ice cores and things like that, but they're interested in the tech. And there's a rush to get to the tech first because there's a lot of stuff that's buried underneath the ice. Again, our Atlantis project goes into that quite a bit because that was a time period where there was an event that was caused by humans themselves, and it disrupted the planet, and there was a huge global catastrophe. And this is not in dispute in mainstream. There's a theory called I believe it's called the Toba catastrophe theory. Lake Toba is what it's oriented around. But the basic idea is around 70,000 years ago, there was a mass extinction event. They call it a volcano that erupted and then wiped out all humanity. I mean, it wiped out most life on Earth, except in terms of humans, it wiped out all of approximately 2,000 to 5,000 surviving pairs of people. Now, this is not in dispute. Genetically, geneticists have found that every human on the planet, be they Aborigine, African, Caucasian, European, Slavic, South American, no matter, every single human on the planet are related to the same 2 to maximum 10,000 pairs of people that survived that event, that what they call a volcanic event. But it wasn't a volcano, the Toba catastrophe theory, that actually did it. What happened was humans during the Atlantis time period, about 70,000 years ago, approximately, they were drilling in an attempt to capture the energy from underneath. I mean, the whole inside of the planet is liquid molten rock. There's a ton of heat down there, and they thought they could capture it. And they were digging, and they essentially popped the balloon. And so that happened and actually not far from Australia and a little bit around the New Zealand area. It wasn't the Lake Toba, it wasn't in Indonesia, but it was more towards the New Zealand type. And it was a huge explosion. And it popped the balloon, and there was a huge eruption of material that came out. And there was also a depression that was created in the antipode. The antipode is exactly opposite. And that was in what we would consider the Europe that used to exist before the event. And that was the place that's over the Atlantic Ocean that's going to be west of Portugal. So it went for, like 1,000 miles. Europe went for like 1,000 miles more. Wow. into the Atlantic Ocean. And that's the antipode of where it popped on the other side. And it sunk in. And down below on the ocean down there, you have ruins, but they're like 3 miles underneath the water. And we covered that in our Atlantis project. Right. However, that was basically when the Antarctica started to freeze over. And that's when all of the tech started. And there were only 2 to 10,000 pairs of people. That's like 4,000 to 20,000 people that were breeding. Now, there could have been some people that survived that were not breeding, older people and things like that. But people that were breeding, all of our genes come out of those same 4,000 to like 20,000 people that were having sex and breeding. And that is not in dispute in the mainstream scientific community. That happened. But when you talk about the more recent stuff that happened, like the Antarctica bases and so on, That involves World War II. And there was a German base in Antarctica that was set up by the reptilians, actually. And when the United States and the Allies invaded Europe in World War II and conquered Nazi Germany in the European theater, they discovered that there was one Nazi base still remaining, and that was in Antarctica. So they sent Admiral Byrd down with an aircraft carrier and an entire flotilla. American aircraft carriers never go anywhere alone. There's always a flotilla that goes with them, a repair ship, lots of destroyers, submarine, at least one submarine, tons of aircraft. They go as a flotilla. They went down with about 13 ships, 55,000 armed troops to their teeth. And then the government said, oh, they're going down for a reconnaissance mission to see if there's maybe some place that they can put an airfield. Right. What? You don't send down a flotilla armed to the teeth. And they got down there and they were smashed. No, and we cover that in our Project High Jump. Right. And that they were smashed, and they thought they were being attacked by Nazis flying UFOs. The reality was the Nazis were actually in a base in Antarctica, but they were Aryan-looking type of ETs that were actually flying the alien craft. The Nazis weren't up to flying those craft, but the Americans thought they were the ones flying the craft, and the aliens knocked the dickens out of Admiral Byrd's ships. They had to retreat, and that was, by the way, the cause of the Americans signing the agreements with the reptilians and the what we call the Orions, the repressive extraterrestrials, because what happened was the Americans said, oh my gosh, we have a group of Nazis that could, in one base in Antarctica, could basically knock out the entire American military force in like half an hour. Yeah. And then the reptilians came in, having duped the Americans. And they basically said, the reptilians in alliance with the Orions, they basically came in and said, we understand you have a problem. Oh my goodness, Nazis in Antarctica? That's terrible. Tell you what, we'll take care of that for you. Just sign here. And that was a decision that the Americans and a few other governments made to allow the reptilians and the Orions to operate on American soil and on Earth. And that's what's the cause of the problems right now. There was a free will decision to align themselves with that particular group. And that's what the free will ETs are up against right now. They're trying to reverse that. Yeah. And they're also trying to prevent another agreement to be signed. That's why you see trouble brewing in the world right now. There's an attempt by the extraterrestrials that are oppressive to create another superstorm. And for the governments to say, oh my gosh, we're going to have nuclear Armageddon between China, Russia, and United States. Europe is going to pieces. Everything's going to. And then the extraterrestrials, the oppressive ones, can come in one more time and say, how about we update our agreement? And we understand you have a problem. Honest, we can take care of that for you. You want us to take care of it for you? Peace. Now, they can take care of it in a blink of an eye because they're creating the problems by mentally manipulating those leaders in the first place. In a blink of an eye, they can stop the whole Russian situation with Ukraine. They can stop the whole China invade Taiwan situation. They just mentally manipulate the leadership and they say, we took care of it for you. Everyone's at peace now. Thank you for signing the documents. Once the documents are signed, then the free will ETs can do nothing. Yeah. And they will withdraw from the system. And they'll try somewhere else.
Yeah. Well, let's hope that that doesn't happen. But I'm kind of wondering then, and I seem to think that this is those German Nazis that were down at Antarctica at that time. Perhaps they are also the offshoot that ended up on Ceres, the Ceres colony that Tony Rodriguez talks about, because the German Nazis that are now on Ceres, they see, and Tony actually said that when he was on Ceres and they were in one of their enormous hangars, there was a flag for Earth that represented what Earth was, and basically it was it's a picture of planet Earth covered in chains, which kind of depicts exactly what our planet is right now, a prison planet.
That's exactly correct. Now, we do know, because of our remote viewing studies, we do know that ISBs that's what we are, ISBs, people who, someone who is for the purpose of being, nothing more. live forever. It is impossible to kill a person. However, once you understand that and you understand the technologies that are associated with that, then the most valuable thing that you can have in the universe is not mineral resources or something like that. It's a collection of ISBs. And what you have is 8 billion humans in physical form, 8 billion ISBs on planet Earth. And you have probably tens of billions in the wings, recycling in and out. That's a huge that are not currently in physical form. That's a huge body of people. Nothing can happen in the galaxy without an ISB animating it. And so that population is an extremely valuable resource for the oppressive ETs, which is why they're here in the first place. They're not looking for gold. They're not looking for tech. They have all the tech they want. They're looking for us. We are the population. But the free will ETs want that to end, in large part because the population that's imprisoned here, we're their relatives. And we were taken from areas in large part where free will ETs are, and they want their relatives and friends back. So that's why but it's a hard problem. It's a hard nut to solve, all of which mainstream can ignore and say, this is crazy talk, this is nuts, until you see the ETs in huge numbers right above your head with your own cameras. And that's what we're doing now in Farsight since January of this year. We're showing people how to take those videos so you can see the ships.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So in many respects, and I guess technology has done a fantastic thing in the distraction of keeping people absolutely distracted with their cell phones, and the amount and the saturation of entertainment to keep people entrained in this certain frequency, because they don't want people to question or start to think and to use their brain. They just want to keep them in that, hypnotic, semi-hypnotic state where their ISB energy or their soul energy is very easily usable. And it's like you say, it is a very it's the most important commodity of us. That is what we have. I mean, a commodity, but it's so much more than that. But it's our most valuable aspect of ourselves. There's nothing more valuable than that energy. And like you say, no amount of mineral resources or technology, there is no equivalent that meets that.
Yeah, the stuff that you mentioned with regard to Tony Rodriguez, it's not only possible, but you have to ask, once you understand that the extraterrestrials are here in huge numbers, and you understand the science of an ISB operating in a human body, and you understand that the ETs can travel across time and space, then you'd have to say, then why would the stuff that Tony Rodriguez described, why would it not happen? Not is he telling the truth? Is it correct? But you have to reverse it and say, why would it not happen? It's to the point where you say, it's impossible for it not to be true. It's impossible for it not to happen, because that's exactly what the oppressive extraterrestrials want. They want a huge mercenary force. They want people that they can do whatever they want with. And they're going to get ISBs. You have to have an ISB to animate a body in order to fight wars. The reptilians aren't going to fight all the wars by themselves. They want mercenary forces. They have to have people to do that. They have to have workers, not a few workers, zillions of workers. And they have to have prostitutes. They have to have cooks. They have to have people that do all types of things. And they're being forced into this labor type of situation. The free will ETs, however, are more militarily dominant in the solar system right now. They have limits on what they're going to allow the reptilians to do. So that's why you have things like the 20 and back program. You can take somebody's ISB for 20 years, but you got to put it back, wipe out the memory and things like that. And they have to, if you look at Tony Rodriguez's book, he clearly describes how the last thing that they did before they abducted him and took him off was to ask him if he wanted to do this. And they can lie to you so that you think you're participating in disclosure, contact with extraterrestrials, first contact. And so you say, sure, I want to help. That's a free will decision. And then they got you.
Yeah.
And so once they have you, they can do whatever they want. 20 years later, you come back, mind is wiped, and they put you back in the body where you left, and you go on. The issue with Tony is he started to remember
Well, he wanted
some.
conscious recall. I know this because I transcribed the entire book. I'm the one that first offered to write the book for Tony to help him retrieve and get this information out. And so I spent, I think 2.5 years with Tony sending me these audio clips of me then needing to transcribe this. So it would help him form this book to create a foundation for letting people know this is happening.
Yeah.
This is real.
Yeah.
And it seems unbelievable, but this is what our world is.
No.
I only have 4 minutes left, by the way.
Okay.
So should we wrap this up for now? I have to travel today. Unfortunately, I'm going to have to cut it.
It's great.
But it's been a great honor and privilege to have you on, Dr. Courtney Brown. Thank you so much for your time today. We should do this again sometime when we can, liaise the time, because there's plenty of questions that I would like to ask, and obviously more insight from you and Fireside Institute would be fantastic to have. You got any?
Actually, it's my honor to be here. You're a real pioneer, and you were pioneering even when you were helping Tony to put all that stuff together. And it's a great honor for me to be here with you, and I appreciate the time that you've offered me to put in some of my 2 cents.
Yeah, no, that's fantastic, and we absolutely appreciate all of your work that you've done to help humanity and to raise this consciousness, to help bring knowing and awareness to what is happening and what our planet is as a collective. And we can overcome this. We can overcome this oppression. People have to believe in the power that they have as an SB. Like we were saying, it is the most valuable aspect and essence that we have and what we are. There's nothing greater.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Courtney Brown. It's been a pleasure.